Hello everyone, I'm Daniel, and welcome to part 2 of where I am making a latex mask. We left off with the last episode. I was starting to actually try to carve in some of the fine details in between this episode and the last one. I've almost done. So for this episode, I'm going to try to finish this up, get some pics, send them to the customer for the final approval to make sure that they're okay with the sculpt. And then from there, I'm going to go ahead and start going pouring the plaster of Paris to make the mold, and then I'm going to get the latex, the mask making latex, pour that in to actually have the mask. And depending on how long this video is, either I'm going to go ahead and call it quits there and we'll have a part 3, or I might go ahead and try to finish up this episode by having the mask painted and have the straps put in that the customer will use to put on its head. So let's go ahead and get to it. So here is the sculpt. As mentioned, it's for the most part done. This is now that's depending on whether or not if the customer wants me to make any last minute changes. So what I'm going to do here to finish this up before I take the pictures is I'm going to smooth it out and also add in some textures. I've already done a little bit of that, as you could probably see, but I had to go in and make a couple of additional changes that messed up some of it, so I'm going to fix it. So I just got this sponge right here. It's a natural sponge. I'm going to dip it in some water. I don't want it too wet. I just want it moist. And so now I'm going to go ahead and go through first, and I want to concentrate on the areas of the skin, not the areas of the muscle and tissue, just the skin, and just go through and brush across this. And what this is going to do is it's going to soften a lot of those details, which is what I'm wanting to do. And if I push a little harder and scrunch it in, I can actually get some details carved out. And if I go lightly, I can get some details to be softened up. So just like that. So I'm just going to go through the whole thing. And then if I want to add texture, what I'm going to do instead of brushing, I'm just going to take this and just start patting it just like that. It's probably just still a little too wet, and I might actually go in with a paper towel, but like that. So what that does, that adds in a little bit of texture. It doesn't make it to where it's flat. It's going to kind of give it the illusion that there are some, pores there. There's some, make it look a little bit more like actual skin texture, which is what we are wanting. This might be one of those things to where, given the nature of this mask, nobody might ever see any of the details that I'm putting onto this except for the wearer themselves, but you never know. Yeah. So just like that. And go through. Let me get a different tool here. It's a little pick tool, and I see a couple of areas where I guess the brush, or not the brush, but the sponge kind of removed or went down a little bit too far and smoothed out some of the details I didn't want it to smooth out. So let me go back in and go. And with the texturing, me patting, I want to try to go over it to eliminate the brush marks. When I do that, there's a brush mark, so to eliminate that, I want to try to pat that area out as much as possible. A little bit heavy, and then just lightly to eliminate those brush marks. I'm not 100% positive with the plaster of exactly how much detail this is going to pick up, but I'm just going to assume that it's going to pick up 100% detail. So that's the way I'm going to treat this, as if that's exactly what it's going to do. So let me go ahead and finish this up, and I'll come in and show y'all the finished sculpt. Okay, so I have the finished sculpt here. It's the way that the customer wants it. Little spot right there. I think I might have bumped into it. I'll fix that here in just a second. But at this point, though, I'm ready to go ahead and start casting the actual mold. I took some spare clay to kind of build a dam around it so the plaster doesn't flow out and it tries to build up, had the best chance of building up inside this little area here. I think I got enough thickness on it. So I got to start moving quick because this stuff is going to start drying. It's going to start cracking. I had that problem with the previous mask that I've done. I think the Freddy Krueger mask is that it started drying when I was applying the press or plaster, and the cracks actually started showing up. So I need to get this started as quick as possible. I want to fix this little spot right there, but I've already done the plaster mixing and everything already on camera. I might go ahead and film the first initial layer, but after that, though, I'm just going to probably jump ahead to the spot where I'm ready to start removing the clay. And I'm also going to do this without putting in any mold release, and hopefully that will work out fine. It might end up being a big mistake. I hope not, because that's going to set me back. But I'm pretty sure that once the clay is, or once the plaster is dried, I should be able to remove the clay, and especially the water-based clay, I should be able to just rinse and wash that out. So, as you probably know, from previous episodes, the first layer you want to be runny to try to capture as much of the details as possible. And I could use a brush here, but I'm actually going to try to avoid using that if possible, because I don't want to mess up any of the texture that I have on this mask. Alright, and I'll just continue adding on, building this up, and see what we get. So I think enough time has passed to where I can go ahead and remove it, or at least attempt to. And this is always the part that worries me, because if any part of this failed, that means I got to redo this whole process all over again. So fingers crossed that everything turned out okay. There we go. There's that. And let me see. Probably can't pry that out. Let's go ahead and try to remove some of this clay here. There we go. And this clay here, at least this plasticine clay, I'm going to try to reuse it again. Definitely not for anything with detail, but at least for making walls and barriers, and or filling out stuff. Okay. There we go. All right. Start removing the clay. And some of the clay-based, or the water-based clay, is coming out with it. That's good. That's what I'm wanting. There. And there it is. I'm going to wait for this to dry a little bit more. I'm going to go through with a wet sponge and make sure that the inside's all cleaned out. A little bit of pieces of clay, like right there, is completely removed. But I think we got it where we can go ahead and start working on that. Okay, everyone, so I've gotten this all cleaned out. I've used running water, a sponge, and a toothbrush to get in there and try to get out as much of the clay as possible. And right now, at this point in time, I am waiting for some mask making latex that I've ordered to come in. But until then, I did realize that I've bought some of this regular, standard, general purpose liquid latex. Now, this is not what some people have recommended online to use for making actual masks, so that's why I got the mask making latex come in. But I think I have used this type of stuff for my masks before, and so why not go ahead and do kind of a dry run, a prototype, so to say, one just to kind of really see what the mask looks like, and it kind of gives me a way to test, see how it feels on the face, and go ahead and start to experiment with it on painting techniques and things like that. Actually, that's probably what I'm going to go ahead and do is make that cast and do a rough paint job on it, submit that to the customer so they can say, yeah, that's the paint style that I want, or let's try something a little bit. That way I could do it on using this cheaper latex rather than the mask making latex, which is a little bit more expensive, I believe. So let me go ahead and do that. I'm going to pour all of this into here. Hopefully it's enough to where it covers at least where the mask is at. Let that sit to build up the layer, and then drain it all out. Let the whole the mask dry, and then pull it out. And let's see what we got. Okay, so I have here the test pour. This is the first pour of the latex, and I've went ahead and trimmed it a little bit. Now, as I mentioned, this is only for testing purposes. This is not the actual mask that I'm going to deliver to the customer. This is just using regular latex, but it's fully cured at this point, and it is very durable. So if this is all that you have, by all means, you can go ahead and use regular latex for the mask. However, though, it's been always recommended to use mask making latex, so that's what I got. So I'm going to go ahead and do another pour using mask making latex, which I got right here. Just got it in. It's a quart, so that should be almost enough to fill up all of this, or at least up to the point to where the lines are at. So let's go ahead, pour it in, and see what we get. Okay, so it wasn't exactly enough to fill it up, so I'm going to do kind of a bit of a hybrid of the two processes. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to, we're going to tilt it this way, let it all slush to that side, like so. I'm going to let that sit for about 5, maybe 10 minutes, and then I'll slush it to the other side, let that sit 5, 10 minutes, and so on and so forth, and hopefully that should give me the same effect. So when I come back in, it should be ready. I'm going to go ahead and have it poured out and dried, so it might be overnight, and then when we come back, I'll be able to pull it out, and we'll see what we got. All right, so here we are. We have the final pour, the finished pour. This is actually going to be the mask that the customer's going to have, or at least I hope so. That's as long as nothing goes wrong. But the mold is still good, so I can always pour another one if that's so much the case. I went ahead and skipped a couple of steps, to get to here. I've already pulled it out and everything, and I'm ready to go ahead and start cutting it up. But this is my first time using mask making latex, and I can definitely feel the difference between this type of latex, even in some of the thinner areas, as opposed to the regular latex. This stuff is a lot stronger, a lot more sturdier, and it picks up a lot of details. So I'm going to go ahead and start cutting away a lot of this flashing here. So, and I got to be very careful though. I don't want to cut too much into the actual finished part. So let me go ahead and do that, and I'll be right back in. Okay, all done. Well, I say almost all done. There's going to be some areas I'm going to go in with an X-Acto knife and even with my little sander bit, just to get a little bit close. I just felt a little bit uncomfortable trying to get that with the blade because I didn't want to cut too, or with the scissors because I didn't want to cut too much into it. But that is the mask right there, ready for me to go ahead and paint it and start fastening in all the straps and everything. And once that's all done, and show it to the customer, and they give me the final approval that everything is the way that they want it, then I get to send it off to them. Now, I think I mentioned it before, but I've already did a test pour with using some regular latex. So I have that, and I've already got it painted, and I've sent that to the customer. So I'm waiting to hear back from them to see if they like it. And if they do like the paint job that I have planned for it, then I'm going to go ahead and copy that onto that. So that should be the next thing that we'll be ready to do. So let's wait on that. So the customer got back with me and said they're a-okay with the paint job that I did on the test piece. So here I am now in my wife's shop to go ahead and borrow the the airbrush to go ahead and start actually applying that paint onto the mask. So I went ahead and kind of pinned it temporarily into this foam head here. So I have a good little canvas to work on, so it's nice and stretched out. And I've already went ahead and made my first little deal of paint right here. And what I'm using is it's 1 part acrylic paint that you buy at the store, 1 part liquid latex, and also, just to thin it out for the airbrush, 1 part water. So it's 1 part of each. I've gotten that online, so I'm going to go ahead and give that a try. So let me go ahead and start painting. Okay, let's go ahead. And the reason why I'm using the airbrush, because I know it's going to give me a good layer all the way across without giving me brush strokes. However, though, I gotta really work on how this actually presses. It's not necessarily the best. With a little bit of practice, so I think I can get it. Okay, so I let that first coat dry, and I went ahead and made some additional colors. I have, well, for lack of a better term, kind of a highlight. It's darker than this base color, but compared to this color right here, it's lighter. So it's a highlight and kind of one for shadows, but also to try to speckle throughout, to mix it up, to try to get that nice little rotten flesh tone look. And that's what I'm kind of looking for. So for these 2 colors are representing decaying flesh and flesh that has somewhat kind of been leatherized to a certain degree. It's funny. I mean, what flesh does once it starts rotting, if it's not leathered properly, like how you would leather any other kind of animal skin, and so these 2 colors mixed with a couple of other colors I'm going to be making should try to get that look. So I'm going to go ahead and continue going in and using my airbrush to kind of get some of those little details in, put a little bit of color, and we'll see how that looks. So I'll be right back. So here's how it looks after that little bit of this kind of greenish decayed skin color, and I don't think it's really showing up on the on film on how it looks, but I mean, it's really starting to kind of take form. I mean, that little bit of extra color goes a long way into just bringing out a lot of the the shadows and even some of the highlights and everything. So now I'm going to go ahead and start applying this color right here, which I'm probably going to use a lot more of the color just to kind of lighten this up a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and pour this in, get my settings down on this, and go ahead and start painting this, and we'll see how it looks. Alright, so everybody, this is where we're at with the mask right now. It is, I would have to say, 85% completed. However, there is a problem. The more that I started looking at this, the more I started thinking that it may actually be a bit too small. I mean, it seems like for here it's fitting very well on to the styrofoam head, but I put it on myself. It's not. It's not fitting very well. So, and this styrofoam head, I believe, I'm not 100% positive, but at least in relation to me, it's probably about actually only 75% scale, 3/4 scale. So I can't really use this as a judgment call on if the mask is going to fit the client or not. We tried to do a couple of things between me and him to try to see if we can get it to fit, and ultimately what it came right down to is that he's not too sure, I'm not too sure. I kept thinking, well, maybe we could try risking sending it to him and finished and see if he likes it. But in the end, I've decided that I'm going to go ahead and start over again and do a brand new sculpt. This time, what I plan on doing is I'm going to use, instead of trying to use dimensions that I've gotten from the customer, because I think one part of the problem, well, there's two parts of the problem here, is that one, the latex shrinks, and so I think this shrunk a little bit, and that little bit of shrinking was enough to where it it made it. I mean, it made a difference. The other thing is that I was using pictures that the gentleman was sent to me, and even though those kind of work, after doing some research, I found out that different cameras, different phones, they have different focal lengths, which means that there's certain distance that the phone has to be from you, between you and it, in order for everything to scale, so to say, or to everything to actually all kind of sync up. If you get too close or too far away, everything starts getting a little bit distorted. Does that make sense? I know there's a lot of stuff online where they talk about the focal length, focal distance, and stuff like that. So I think that might have skewed some of the measurements that I was trying to use to try to correlate, with the distances of his head and things like that. So I think what the best option for me to do is for me to go ahead and do it all over again, but this time use my own face as a bit of a reference. I think my head's a little bit probably longer than him, but I think that would still work, because even if my head's a little bit bigger than his, that would still accommodate when it shrinks back down, or when the latex shrinks, then hopefully it should probably fit him. And besides, I think that it's better to try to go larger than it would be a lot smaller, because larger you can accommodate easier. Smaller, it's difficult to try to stretch it over your head and have it to be comfortable. And what this gentleman wants to do with this mask, he could be wearing it for a long period of time, so it has to fit him comfortably. So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to do that. I know it took me a long time to just sculpt up to here, but that was me doing it during free time, a little bit here, a little bit there, 30 minutes here, an hour there. But I feel like that if I really kind of sit down on it and take care of, try to get it all done, and grind it out, I could probably have this all sculpted and hopefully even a new mold plastered probably in one day. So that is what I'm going to try. So it's a bit of a shame. I mean, this mask turned out very well. I don't know if it shows up very well on camera on how good it actually looks, especially with the paint job and everything. But that's the way it goes. So we live and learn. Like my channel is, I'm trying to master creation, which means I haven't mastered it yet. So I'm going to be making mistakes. If this is a bit of a mistake, it's going to set me off time-wise just a little bit, but I learned from the mistakes, and so we're going to go on forward with that. So we're going to stop the episode here, and I'm not going to film any of the other processes that I'm going to do from this point forward to try to get me back up to this point, because we've already did again. It's just me doing everything that you just saw, just a little bit larger. But we will come back with one more video when I get the new mask, to this point right here, and then I'll go continue with that to show you how we're going to finish the mask, and then we'll see the final product. But until then, I just want to say this is Daniel, aka B-Bell Dan. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next episode.